Real quick, off topic, since when did Walgreens started selling adult toys on their site? Anyways, hey guys, David here. Just a couple things real quick. One, I am a little under the weather, so every now and then you may hear my voice crack more so than usual, or I might get interrupted by an itch in my throat and I have to cough it out, so there you go. But the second thing is that apparently I didn't get the memo that there was going to be no Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. last week, which explains why there was no video for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. last week. I was there waiting like, oh my god, yeah, okay, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and there was none. So apparently they took some sort of break in order to prepare for the two-part story arc that is the setup for what I think is going to be the mid-season finale, because the next episode is episode 11, and this was ordered for a 22 episode season. So I imagine that this is the big conclusion to at least the first half of the season before we continue it in next year or whenever it is that they plan to bring back the show. But here is my review for episode 10 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. entitled The Bridge. And of course, spoilers for the episode are going to be in this review, so if you have not watched it, please don't watch this video. And the first spoiler is that the episode is titled after the setting for its climax. And the big thing about this episode is the return of Michael Peterson. That's right, our first subject from our first case in the pilot episode of the show has returned, and it is a very warm welcome because since the pilot episode he has been controlling his powers, controlling his attitude. He has been training to where he can hopefully be out on the field along with S.H.I.E.L.D., much like Captain America is doing these days, in which we'll see the extension of that next year. But he is practically modeling himself after Captain America. He sees Captain America and he says, you know what, I think I could put my powers to that kind of use. So we see him train, and he is brought on board by S.H.I.E.L.D. to figure out why an inmate was broken out of prison by what seems to be 3 centipede soldiers. Centipede is of course the serum that was put into him that developed him into what would have been a super soldier, but instead made him into somebody with powers. So he's brought onto this case to help out S.H.I.E.L.D. and investigate that, and what makes everything just come together even more, which is one of the things I liked about this episode, is that that inmate happens to be the man that the girl in the flower dress from the episode, the girl with the flower dress, was talking to at the very end of that episode. There goes my voice. And that's one of the things I liked about this episode is the writing. Now, granted, it does something that, ironically, the episode, the girl with the flower dress, did, was where it was written by one person, but it felt like it was written by 2 people, where one half of the episode was done really well and the other half wasn't very good. It wasn't up to par, but it was still an overall really good episode. And like I said, one of the things that I enjoyed about it was the writing. I really liked how they managed to tie in things without making things very nonsensical. I liked how they said, okay, we're gonna bring back Mike Peterson from the first one, and we're also gonna bring back the woman in the dress from that episode that is titled after her. And we also bring back that mysterious figure that was in the prison, only this time give him more screen time so that you can get an idea of what kind of villain he is. Which props to the actor, because I really liked his delivery of his lines and the way he acted, because I was expecting him to just be a typical, we will take over, blah, we will defeat S.H.I.E.L.D. I was totally expecting that, but fortunately he has this calm demeanor. He's eating steak. He calmly tells the guy, "You gotta call me sir." I thought that was a little bit more intimidating than a guy saying, "It's sir," with the fierce, aggressive face. I loved his demeanor. I think that this could play out even more frighteningly than somebody who is intentionally aggressive, intentionally like, I'm the bad guy. At the other side of the spectrum, you got Mike Peterson, who is a way more likable character than he was in that first episode. He had his likable moments in that pilot, but they were contradicted by scenes where he instantly switched to saying, "No, S.H.I.E.L.D., you're the bad guy." Really disliked those moments, because not so much because he thought that S.H.I.E.L.D. was the bad guy, but because those transitions were just too quick that they felt artificial and didn't make sense. It takes more than just one episode to be able to take a character from that extreme to another. And at the most you need, or at the least I should say, you need at least 2 episodes, and even then that might not even work. I mean, Look at The Walking Dead. But here, from beginning to end, he's a good guy, and I was rooting for him. And while we're on the subject of likable characters, and again, this is due in part to the writing, I really like how Ward is becoming simply just a much more likable character. Everybody was complaining that, oh, he's very stoic and dull, especially at the beginning of the series, but by this time, he's flirting with May because of their history, and at the same time, he's having conversations about women with Coulson, and he's just letting loose while at the same time still retaining the hard demeanor of being an agent. He doesn't forget that, yeah, I'm still a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. I'm not going to forget that. I'm not just going to let my guard down and just be like a slacker or something. But at the same time, I got to learn that sometimes if I don't humanize myself, I'm going to become a robot. Ironically, we practically already have a robot on the team, and that's May. And even then, May herself had her moments where she was humanized. Now, they didn't humanize her in a way where they brought back her backstory from that previous episode where they do hook up. Instead, they went with the angle of humanizing her by making her a girl. Okay, let's go ahead and get away from her just being this robot with a face and actually have her have some genuine girl quality. Now, granted, that girl quality happens to be something that me as a guy, hate it when girls do this, and that is mixed signals. Not knowing what they want. Because one of the things that I like that they went with this direction. I don't like this in real life with women, but I like it that they took it in this. They took it in that direction in this episode, and that is her somewhat as they call it, the flirtationship she has with Ward. Obviously, she is not gonna let go that they hooked up, and it is during that opening scene where they're sparring, and she's giving her that look like, hey. But when Ward gives her that same look and attitude back, she's like, hey, no, not here. Women! And then in the later scene where she's like, don't take a punch from me. I mean, what? Don't treat me like that. I can do it on my own. And then Ward's like, I didn't do it for you. I was, like he says, I was thinking tactical. Don't flatter yourself. And she's like, well, okay. But then after he leaves, you could tell that she's like, well, I kind of would have liked it if, you can tell from her body language when she just rests upon that bar, and you could easily tell that she wanted to take a drink. I was like, oh my gosh, she's doing that thing that girls always do. But I like it because it humanizes her, and it's something that can make her more relatable to the people that are watching her, us, the audience. And during that very same scene, Skye walks in, and once again, Skye is also a likable character, at least to me. A lot of people weren't a huge fan of her recently, but for me, I've been liking her. Now, I'm not saying that she didn't have her moments where she was annoying, because she did. She really did, especially in that episode where she makes the big betrayal towards the team. But she had her fair share of moments where I liked her. I wasn't exactly rooting for her, but I liked her and I accepted her as being part of the team, despite having not much to do when it comes to some of the field work. But this episode demonstrates that she's very sensitive inside, and she is scarred inside, especially by not knowing what happened with her parents. And for those of you who have not liked Skye up to this point, well, you'll get your satisfaction in this episode, because it is in this scene where May verbally slaps her in the face saying, you know what, forget your parents. If you're not focused on this mission, then you better get focused or GTFO. And this really breaks down Skye, and she's just crying her eyes out. And I'm hoping that that comes around some way or another. I honestly don't know where that could go in the series, or at least in the next episode. But it does, just like they did with May and with Ward, this also humanizes Skye in a way where she's just not annoying. And of course, the big man himself, Coulson, of course, they are not letting go his whole secret. Now, I am going to go ahead and play, I don't want to say play, but I'm going to go ahead and be devil's advocate here. And say that, okay, we're 10 episodes in. I think we should go ahead and show something. Not just tell us something, but show us something about what happened with Coulson back in Tahiti. Now, granted, we may get there in the next episode, because based on how this episode ended with the girl saying that, hey, we want to know what happened to you. And why is this important to them? I gotta be honest, I don't know. But maybe we'll more than likely find out in the next episode. I mean, that's the whole reason why it's a two-parter, and why this was the first episode in the season that had a previously on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. thing at the beginning. Hopefully we'll finally learn what happened with Coulson. But at this point, I will admit that I am getting a little tired of the whole tease. Saying something happened. Something happened. Okay, what? And there was also some really good dialogue throughout the episode. Like I said, there's that scene where Ward is talking to Coulson about women, and there's some really good lines spit back and forth. And outside of that scene, there's also plenty of others. And I was actually astonished by how much good dialogue there was in this episode. Now, granted, I said that this was due in part with the writing, and I thought that the writing was good, but there's a possibility that maybe those good lines came from executive producer Joss Whedon, because Joss Whedon is known to go here and there and write certain scenes and certain pieces of dialogue for certain scripts that weren't exactly his. I can't remember which Marvel movie it was. I think it's going to be Guardians of the Galaxy, but I'm not entirely sure. But I think there's a movie within Phase 2 that he wrote a scene for, but he didn't exactly write the entire script. So he may have done that with this episode, because there's certain lines of dialogue that I can tell that's a very Whedon thing for him to write into the script. But still, that means that most of the writing for this episode was good. Now, I said most, because this goes back to what I said at the beginning of the review, is that it felt like that one episode with the girl with the flower dress, half of the episode was really well written, and then the other half was mediocre. Now, in this episode, that other half that's mediocre, it's not so much mediocre, it just didn't live up to par with the other half. And certain things that contribute to that other half would be that there's certain things that didn't make sense or just didn't fit, like Simmons, getting a little flirty by manhandling Mike. I just thought, like, okay, we've seen him before. He's not a new addition to the series. I don't know why Simmons now is getting all touchy. Now, granted, she's never come into complete contact with him, but I don't know, just it didn't fit in for me, and it feels like something that could be saved for another episode and do it a little better, because this is obviously a thing to show that, hey, Fitz obviously has a thing for Simmons, and I get that. And I get that they're going to have to do that at some point so that we can hook those two up. But this just didn't feel the episode to do that, especially with Mike Peterson. I mean, if it was some other character that was also big and buff, muscular, whatever, it would have made sense. And if it was also another story. But because it's this story that is connecting with the rest of the series, as well as bringing in a returning character, Mike Peterson, it just didn't fit. It just didn't feel like the time. And there were other things that didn't make sense, like, for example, those 3 soldiers that are supposed to be super soldiers by this time, they punch some of these characters, and it doesn't look, they're super soldiers. They're supposed to be able to, like, punch through walls and stuff. Shouldn't they be breaking some of these people's bones? I mean, I know they're the main characters, and we know that's not supposed to happen because they're the main characters. They can only take so much damage, like Mike Peterson did in that fight. But if you were to go ahead and apply the laws that you just did, it would make sense for some of these characters to be having serious wounds if they're getting punched by the super soldier who's able to punch through a brick wall. It doesn't make sense. Especially when May is fighting them with, like, metal rods. I mean, how are they not breaking the rods when they're blocking? It doesn't make sense. And much like how I said there was some good dialogue, there was also some bad dialogue. There wasn't enough of it to take notice or to remember particular lines, but I remember there was like 1 or 2 lines where I'm like, that wasn't good. And I understand that they're doing their best to go ahead and tie everything together, but there's one connection that they made, and that is that apparently Centipede was the developer of the technology that was put into the girl's eye in the episode I Spy, which, if you guys remember from my review, is actually probably my favorite episode of the series up until this point. And I understand that the writers are trying to connect all these things, but I feel that particular plot device and having that connect to the plots that are going on in this episode, I feel like that's just a little too much, and I'm afraid that they're gonna just bit off more than they can chew and end up tangling themselves upon these storylines. And lastly, I thought that the possibility of killing off Mike Peterson himself via that huge explosion on the bridge is a nice touch, is a nice little cliffhanger, because this is supposed to happen. This is supposed to be a 2-part episode. And being that Mike Peterson is a bit of an expendable character, there's a possibility that maybe he is dead, or maybe he's gonna come back as, like, this tortured looking I don't want to say creature, but just like this battle scarred being that is just gonna go full on power up, because apart from pushing a bulldozer, he didn't exactly use any of his powers to his full capacity in this episode. Now I understand that they explain that, saying that, oh, when I use up my powers, I drain myself out and I need to rehabilitate, which is totally understandable. And I like that added a sense of realism to how to the capacity of to the limits of the serum. I thought it was realistic in its own way. But even though it was a nice touch to leave you with that cliffhanger of possibly blowing up Mike Peterson, the whole blowing up the car and is Coulson dead, and only to have him be revealed to be alive in that helicopter a second later, I thought that was unnecessary. Like, guys, really? Do you need to go ahead and be like, boom, we blew up this character, now boom, we blew up this character? It was just too much blowing up. Too much blowing up, too many cliffhangers. Just leave us with Mike Peterson. I would have loved if Mike Peterson blew up, and then right afterwards they're like, where's Coulson? And then they show the helicopter. And everybody's able to put two and two together and be like, okay, Coulson's in there. Instead of blowing up that car and making us think for 1 second you're gonna kill off the main character of the series, when we know that this is two-part story arc, a 2-episode story arc. It's unnecessary. And in some ways I can kind of say the same thing about Ward getting shot down by the helicopter. I'm like, I'm pretty sure Ward's gonna be fine. I mean, unless they shot him through the spine and it's gonna have such an emotional toll on Ward as well as the rest of the team, it just felt unnecessary as well. But overall, this was a really likable episode, and it's an episode that generally has me intrigued to see what happens next in the next episode. So because of that, I'm going to go ahead and give The Bridge an 8.6 out of 10, which is a B. I'll definitely be back next week with my review of episode 11, which may or may not be the mid-season finale, because it is episode 11, and like I said, it was ordered for a 22-episode season, so it would make sense for this to be the mid-season finale, in which case we'll probably not see Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a while, at least until either February or March or sometime in the springtime. But until then, keep watching my videos, subscribe if you haven't done so, and thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. It's not affecting me that bad. I mean, hello? Roar. Roar, roar. Oh, God. Roar, roar. Roar. Oh, my God. Roar, roar.